This is the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Sharon Engel and yours truly, Rick Trader. For rebroadcast of our shows for radio, please go to ccrshow.com. That's ccrshow.com. That's for rebroadcast of our radio shows. And for rebroadcast of our latest TV show, please go to conservativecommandosradioshow.com. Sharon, our next guest is with us. The honor of the introduction is yours.
It is a pleasure for me to introduce Craig Richardson, who's the president of the Energy and Environment Legal Institute and is a seasoned professional with more than 25 years of experience. He previously served as executive director of the American Danish Business Council and Leadership for American Futures PAC, LEAD PAC, a PAC founded by former Congressman Steve Largent. In addition, he has provided strategic communications and fundraising services to political clients and worked for the re-election campaigns of several U.S. senators and U.S. representatives. Welcome to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show, Craig Richardson.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. And we asked you to come on and talk about an article that you wrote, Bogus Climate Change Lawsuits Need to Stop. How do we stop those? And we all agree that climate change in itself is bogus, but I think you're getting more to the point of the lawsuits themselves are bogus.
Yeah, it's a little like that movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. I mean, we seems to be over and over again, and we were the ones, you may have recalled maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, or 3 years ago, when the former Attorney General of New York, Eric Schneiderman, got together with Al Gore and 18 of their other buddies, and they stood on a podium saying that they're Exxon knew, and we're going to go after Exxon, and our FOIA request, Freedom of Information, showed that this was nothing more than a Rockefeller-funded effort to essentially shake down these oil companies and do what they did in the 90s with the tobacco industry and essentially create a huge settlement. And so we blew that thing wide open. And after our FOIAs went public, I think by the end of the year, there's 2 left. It was Schneiderman and then Healy from Massachusetts that were left in this coalition. And then Schneiderman had his own Me Too issue. And you know, so every day, like I said, it's like Groundhog Day. Now we got a new Attorney General, and it's always New York, right? Because that's the home of the Rockefellers. ExxonMobil, ironically, is the 2 largest Standard Oil companies that merged. So, you know, it's like I grew up in Boston, so I know what it's all about to see the same names and faces come over and over again. But it is a little bit, repetitive, but they continue to keep going.
Well, you said in a recent study that the U.S. Chamber Institute for Legal Reform estimates that nearly half the costs and compensations paid out in our tort system is about $184 billion. Talk about how these kinds of lawsuits impact that.
Well, I mean, it impacts all industries. You know, for example, I mean, most notably when you're obviously dealing with the medical community and you get doctors preventing defensive medicine. And it's a similar thing here. I mean, companies aren't being innovative. But the bottom line you got to remember in that staggering figure is these are for-profit organizations, and particularly talking about a company like ExxonMobil, they're not going to reach in their pocket and pay for this. This is going to show up in the cost at the gas pumps and the other products that they produce. So it's not like they're trying to shake down the big bad company. No, they're shaking down the average Americans, the ones who can least afford to pay higher gas prices. Thus, who's paying for this money?
Well, and you also say in your article that this most recent arbitrary lawsuit aimed at Exxon is no more than the latest in a series of shakedowns by attorneys in this country. So I want you to talk about who gets that money. They're shaking us down, but who's actually getting rich off of all this?
Well, again, I think if you look at the tobacco settlement of the 1990s, and that's what they modeled this after. Our original FOIA showed that they had, before the Gore and Schneiderman plan was hatched, they actually met in La Jolla, California in 2012, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. They literally used the words, we want to replicate the tobacco settlement type of deal. Only that's the tobacco settlement on steroids when you compare the tobacco tobacco industry to the oil and gas industry. So that's their ultimate thing. And you've got the greedy trial lawyers are going to get their share. But most of all, you're going to get the states who are going to get their share. And the tobacco company is still the gift, settlement is still the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, a lot of these states will run ads and PSAs and things that have nothing to do with health. And it's all funded by the tobacco settlement. So that was their ultimate goal. That continues to be their goal, is essentially to try to take a piece of this company. And quite honestly, I'm not saying that Exxon's a victim in all this. They're playing both sides of the mouth as well. I mean, they're in for carbon tax. They're all in on these other programs. So, and I saw that in the tobacco industry as well. I mean, in the end, this is essentially lawyers from the companies and lawyers from industry and lawyers from the environmentalists. And the ones that are left out in the cold are the American consumers, regardless of where you live.
Well, as a state legislator here in Nevada at the time of the tobacco settlement, what we saw was that they actually were killing the golden goose that laid that egg by all of the anti-tobacco stuff that they were doing. People stopped smoking as much, and so the settlement went down because it was based on a percentage of sales. And so what we thought was going to be a great boon for the state has actually turned out a little less than a happy thing. We should have actually settled for just a lump sum and gone on rather than taking these percentages. And I see that kind of looming out there for things like Exxon, because when they attacked coal, Exxon coal just really hit the bottom here. Are they at all looking at those repercussions? Are they at all thinking about what they're doing when they begin to sue these companies?
Well, I think there's so many layers to this, and behind the scenes, and they're not maybe necessarily directed to this one, but you got the Tom Steyers and the Bloombergs of the world. See, they're all in, not only in shaking down the oil and gas, but they're also all in green energy. The whole renewable energy effort is essentially to shift the use from traditional fuel sources, whether you're coal or you are, or natural gas, to green energy. And so they're already locked in that industry. So the whole thing is it's really a multi-level Ponzi scheme that these people are doing. And in the end, you got a bunch of really bright lawyers out of Manhattan who get together and connive and say, how can we mess around? And then all you need to do is drive through Kentucky, West Virginia, Colorado, parts of Wyoming, and see what they've done to those communities. They've essentially destroyed those communities which rely on coal. Those are great jobs. They've been multi-generational jobs. They're great for our economy, great for our businesses, and they're essentially saying, no, we as New Yorkers want to take all your money and to hell with you, basically. And so it really is that simple, and that's what these people are. They're greedy.
Well, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, that they have nothing forward-looking. They're all about giving us rhetoric that somehow they're going to save the planet for the next generation, but really they don't care about the next generation, as you point out. They're destroying jobs. They're out there destroying industries, and it's just for the dollar that I can make today. That's what it looks like to most of us sitting out here being shaken down, as you say.
Yeah, and if you want to know where this leads to, just turn on the television and look what's happening in Paris. I mean, look what's happening in France. That is a revolt. Literally, I feel like it's 1940 again, or 1789, or whenever maybe there's I can't remember exactly the French Revolution. It's like deja vu all over again. But you know what they're fighting over? Gas prices. They can't drive their cars anymore because gas is $7 or $8, $9 a gallon over there, and that's where this leads. If you start taking away and jacking up people's fuel sources and fuel prices, that's what you're going to get. You're literally going to get rioting in the street, and and we don't. Thank God we have this president, because he came in, he ran on a platform of energy dominance. I'll ask you an open-ended: which country has the best emissions record right in the world right now? It's the United States. We are the cleanest of all. We don't even need any of those climate change policies like the Paris Accord. We're already achieving that based on some switches over to natural gas and some other efforts. We don't need a draconian regulation and to sue everybody to get there, because in the end we're all conservationists. That's the bottom line. We're not crazy environmentalists. We're conservationists.
That I couldn't agree with you more about the conservation versus preservation stuff that goes on out here. But I want you now to talk about the solution. Is there a solution? You say it must stop. How do you figure we can stop this?
Well, I mean, you can't unless unless you want to get tort reform through a Democratic House. You know,
Good luck with that.
To answer your question, I mean, it is the American way, right? The legal system's the American way. I think all you can continue to do. I mean, I say, fortunately, in this case, at least Exxon's fighting back. Sometimes we get industries, and I know in your long history, you've probably seen companies that just fold over and they'd rather roll over rather than. So I think they've got to do what they're doing. They're pushing back. They pushed back in the federal one out in San Francisco. And just lawsuits are two-way streets. There's discovery both ways. I think countersuits are what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? So I think countersuits. I think people jumping on amicus briefs and things like that. Quite honestly, this kind of exposure through programs like yours. Again, looking at harking to Paris, and they have now put a finger on what the problem is because of public relations and because of people who have communicated. They're not believing the false, fake narrative that this is the only way out, these draconian green policies. They get it. You know what? Because they can't drive their cars anymore because it's too expensive. So American people get it. They just need to be, we need to channel that energy.
Well, we have to go to a short break, speaking of channeling energy here. Yeah. And we're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios. And if you'd like to watch us on TV, you can now go to the AUN TV network in San Francisco, San Rafael, Marin, North Bay, San Jose, Silicon Valley, Santa Rosa, Wine Country, Redding, Chico, Sacramento, Monterey, California, and soon to be in Carson City, Tahoe, and Reno, Nevada. We've been talking with our guest, Craig Richardson, about his article, Bogus Climate Change Lawsuits Need to Stop. And we'll be right back with him, our in-studio producer and co-host, Rick Trader, and I'm Sharon Engel.
Thank you for staying with us. This is the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Sharon Engel. Yes, that's Sharon Engel. And yours truly, Rick Trader. And for rebroadcasts of our show, check out our website, ccrshow.com, for the radio show. TV show can be found at conservativecommandosradioshow.com. Like us, friend us, and follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. Our guest this segment is Craig Richardson. He's the president of the Energy and Environmental Legal Institute. Craig, thanks for holding through that break. We appreciate your time.
Sure thing.
Don't you find it ironic, or is it just me, that the Rockefellers are behind this, and Standard Oil is how they made all their money, and Standard Oil, became Exxon, and I just find there's something wrong there.
Well, I used to use the line because we actually did a whole report on the Rockefellers themselves. And, my line was that all roads lead to Rockefeller Plaza. You name an issue and I will show you. I mean, literally the land that the United Nations sits on is their property. So,
wow.
I mean, they are in everything. And the reason we have so many pharmaceuticals in our healthcare, because they pushed that in the 30s. You name an issue and they will have their grubby little hands on it. Right. And they've done more damage to this country than any other family that has ever come along.
We're discussing an article that Craig wrote. Bogus climate change lawsuits need to stop. And again, New York Attorney General Barbara Underwood recently filed lawsuit against ExxonMobil, alleging the company failed to account for the real future cost of complying with greenhouse gas emission regulations. I have a solution. I have a solution to stop all these lawsuits. I guarantee it would stop the lawsuits. Stop selling oil in New York. Stop selling gasoline in New York. I mean, that will solve the lawsuits. You see, you were talking about what's happening in France. What would people in New York do if they can't buy oil to heat their home, if they can't buy gasoline to drive their car? These lawsuits would stop on a dime. I'm serious.
I'm a Red Sox fan. You got no qualms from me. No, I think you're right, though. I mean, because I'll tell you, on the flip side, what I found...
They don't want them. Don't sell it there. They don't want them.
I mean, ironically, to go harken back to the '90s again. I mean, that was Philip Morris's headquarters was New York, and then did all that. So yeah, there's clearly, if you've seen that New Yorker view, the New York, the map they show, the New Yorkers' view of the world. I mean, that's what they think. And what I found most offensive as I got stories from what was going on in the coal country is, they would go down there and the Sierra Club would say, oh well, we know it's going to hurt your industry. So we've put in the bill $2 million for job replacement or job retraining. What are you going to teach these guys to be computer coders? I mean, it's so arrogant that these people do this. And and I know you have a great appreciation for that part of America. That is so much a part of America. And to think that these guys go down there and say that they can dictate the energy policies, not only that affect those local communities, but then us nationally, because the Sierra Club has convinced everybody that the world is falling apart, and that's just not that's not the case. And then at some point, we're at least got, again, outlets like yours where we can get but look at how New York is orchestrated. It's not just the fact that they own the attorney generals. They've literally been able to put whatever they want in the New York Times on a daily basis. And I been in PR in Washington for 30 years. The way it works is something's printed in the New York Times. In the old days, we had 3 networks, but ABC, CBS, NBC, they rip and read. They rip off whatever's top fold of the New York Times is the lead story on all 3 networks. And that's essentially how they control the narrative. And it's goes part and parcel to their strength and power to be able to really do what they're trying to do. So the only way back is to push back.
Yeah, well, let's continue to talk about New York stupidity. New York has I don't know, billions or trillions of dollars worth of gas and oil right under it in the Marcellus Shale. They don't want to touch it. Tapping into the Marcellus has been a boon to Pennsylvania, has saved family farms. And it's the Marcellus field is not just confined to Pennsylvania. It goes up into the southern half of New York. And, I would think the people that are in that region would also be up at arms, the fact that they can't tap into it.
Well, again, I think the way that this is really, the United States has evolved or devolved, is that you essentially have a very small geographical area, but very large population base controlling the rest of the country. And I think you get outside of Manhattan and get up to northern New York, and I think you'd find a lot of people would agree with you. But unfortunately, the way the political system is that state is as blue as it gets. And the irony is, the first electrical grid power plant was in Niagara Falls. Mm-hmm. They had hydro, they have a lot of hydro there too. Right. And for some reason, these windmills that break down and are eyesores, or the things they put on solar panels of people's houses somehow are renewable, but hydro, they don't even count hydro as renewable. So, I mean, you realize that it's a political move. It's a ideological doctrine these people are pushing, and none of it makes sense. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, and there are a lot of people, I'm sure, in those states that are very blue that are having a problem with this.
Right. Our guest this segment is Craig Richardson. He's the president of the Energy and Environment Legal Institute. Have you ever been to France?
Have I ever what?
Ever been to France?
I was there for the last COP, the IPCC's climate change thing, and I got there, and my friend Myron Ebel from CEI was his face was all over wanted posters all over Paris, because we were doing a counter event to their to the UN's event, so they know us and we know them. But yes, I was there. It was actually a couple months after they had the terrorist attack there.
Well, I was in France a few times, and one of the things I learned about France, 80% of rural France heats their homes by burning wood. Mm-hmm. Now, when you want to talk about something that's polluting, I would think burning wood is a whole lot dirtier than coal or oil or gas or natural gas. And this is what it might take, and I'm serious, Sharon and Greg, this is what it might take for people in this country to finally wrap their head around the fact that we need energy. We need cheap energy, and we need a whole lot of it. Not just to power our cars, not just to heat our homes, but just for our industry, for our businesses. I'm surprised, Craig, I'm surprised it's taken this long for the people in France to revolt against these high energy prices. When I was there, 6-7 8 years ago when I was there, the price of gasoline worked out to about $6 or $7 a gallon at that time. I'm surprised it's taken them this long to finally revolt.
Well, I think what you've seen, and again, I don't think it's a coincidence, but what you have a similar model there. You've got a large metropolitan area in Paris, and the good, and we like to make fun of the French, but they actually are very entwined with our history. I mean, we wouldn't have America if it wasn't for them. They came and they lent us the ships and the money.
Vice versa.
Right, and we help them, and so we do like to make fun of them because they, but that's just the way it is. But no, if you get outside of you get to southern France, I mean they're very very fond of Americans, and they're very fond of the. I was at an Atlas Freedom Foundation event, and I had a Parisian come up to me, and I was complaining about where America was going, and he literally grabbed me by the arm and shook me and looked me in the face, and he said, "You can never give up." He said, "Because if America gives up, the world is gone." He said, "I will never go back to France again. I live in New York now, and I will never go back to France because this is where freedom is." And so we have to pray for our brothers and sisters over not only in France, but you're going to see this as much as the corporate fake news is trying to tamp this down. This is going to be the spark that lights the rest of the Europe, because they've been following these same green plans now. They're all into the same thing. I mean, it's all the UN driven, all these unrealistic renewable targets that are driving these things, and they're the first ones to step up. But they're all coming. I mean, in England, you talk about burning wood. We did an energy poverty video. They're burning their seniors are burning books. They're going to the bookstore to buy books.
Wow.
Because they can't afford it. And typical Brits have the wonderful euphemism. They call them winter deaths. And that's what happens when people freeze to death because they can't heat their homes. And there's tens of thousands of those. So, I mean, they've been sweeping this under the rug. They've been using euphemisms for what this is. And it's literally killing their people. And between that and the immigration policies over there, they're saying no mas. Yeah. And they're literally taking to the streets.
Craig Richardson, I wanted to touch on another name, Tom Steyer. All right, Tom Steyer is making noise like he's going to run for president.
Yeah, I hope so.
You hope so? Well, I hope so too.
He's too much of a coward. He would never do it.
Well, this man is, in my opinion, is a total hypocrite. I guess about 3-4 years ago, he was talking. Well, during the Obama years, he was talking about the Keystone Pipeline, how terrible, we have to stop the Keystone Pipeline. What I found out about him, he was invested in a company that was invested in the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Now, if you shut off the oil coming out of Alberta from coming into the United States through the Keystone Pipeline, an alternative would be to ship it to the west coast of Canada for export to China. Now, how are they going to get that oil from Alberta to Vancouver? Something called the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And that was Tom Steyer. And now he's talking about, oil's a dirty thing. He made a lot of money off the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Yeah, before he became a born-again green, he made all his money in coal-fired power plants through Fallon investments. In fact, even while he claims he's no longer part of Fallon, Fallon's still investing in overseas coal-fired power plants in Vietnam. Now, the guy is a sham. He is the worst type of American there is. He's claiming to be green. He's claiming to be helping the environment. By the way, he's another New Yorker. He's a Manhattan-bred guy who went out to the West Coast. You look at his pedigree. His dad was Cromwell in one of the big law firms there. He had all the pedigree that those people have. And he got in early, into investments into energy. And then all of a sudden, when he and Al Gore saw the green energy boom coming along, and they could get a guy like Obama in the White House, they suddenly switched over, at least publicly. But like you said, even privately, they didn't.
Right.
I mean, not bad work if you can get it, I guess.
Right. Craig Richardson, president of the Energy and Environment Legal Institute. We want to thank you so much for joining us on Conservative Commandos. Please tell our audience how they could find out more about what you're doing, what you write, and also about the Energy and Environmental Legal Institute. Sure,
we have a website, as everybody does, but our URL is eelegal.org. So anytime they want to pop on there, can get whatever we're up to.
And this article where we are referring to, where is that?
It'll be right in the front, on the top. Yeah, we have a news section right on the top. It'll be right there when we get there.
All right. Craig Richardson, thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
Great. God bless. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Appreciate your time. And you are listening and watching the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with Sharon Angle and yours truly, Rick Trader. Don't go away. Sharon and I are going to take a short break, and we will be back with more.